the Happy Scientist podcast. Each episode is designed to make you more focused, more productive, and more satisfied in the lab. You can find us online at bitesizebio.com/happy scientist. Your hosts are Kenneth Vogt, founder of the executive coaching firm Vera Claritas, and Dr. Nick Oswald, PhD, bioscientist, and founder of Bitesize Bio.
Hi everyone, this is Nick Oswald welcoming you to this Bitesize Bio webinar, which today is a live episode of the Happy Scientist podcast. If you want to become a happier, healthier, and more productive scientist, you're in the right place. With me, as always, is Mr. Kenneth Vogt. In these sessions, we'll hear from Ken, mostly on principles that will help shape you for a happier and more successful career. And along the way, I'll pitch in with points from my personal experience as a scientist and from working with Ken. If you have any questions along the way, please put them into the questions box and you will get a personalized answer from Ken or myself. Today, we will be covering the second part of our two-part presentation on getting dead practical about to-do lists. This one is about overcoming task avoidance. Ken will be leading this as usual, but first of all, Ken, I'm sorry I left you hanging last time. It wasn't to do with having too many things on my to-do list. It was just a last-minute family day at the beach. So I think we should do an episode on that, giving yourself permission to have fun. What do you think?
I like it. Yeah, I think that sounds fantastic. And somehow we muddled through without you. We've got great production support here. So Connor is once again our producer behind the scenes today, and he does great work for us. So to-do lists. Last time we talked about, call it the practical side of it. Like how do I pick out a good system for myself? How do I pick out what features matter to me? And then how do I pull the trigger and start using it? So here's the problem. If you did all that last week and you figured out which system you need and you got it, and if it's required some kind of installations, required some kind of setup, you've done that. And then you get into it and you start to use it and you find you don't use it. You stop, you hesitate, you get distracted, you do anything but follow your system. And you're wondering, well, what went wrong? I put all the effort into this already. I did the heavy lifting and I picked the right system for me, and this one should work for me. It should be perfect, and yet I'm just not doing it. And so what happened? Well, the thing is that system is a mechanical thing, and whether it's you're just using a yellow legal pad or you're using some full-blown project management system, there's the emotional part for you. There's the human part. Now, I say emotional. I don't want to make it sound like, oh, you're just being hysterical and how you're reacting to this. No, it's not like that. But you are human. And I don't care how clinical you are. I don't care how much of a statistician you are. I don't care how much of a scientist you are. You're still human. And it's not a negative. That's a positive. You're bringing something additional to this. And it can absolutely be wielded for the most positive possible effect. But when it seems like it's working against you, you got to ask yourself, what now? So I want to start off by considering this notion of old habits die hard. Before you had your system, your to-do system, you did whatever you used to do. And for whatever reason, you decided that wasn't working well enough. But it's familiar. And it's what you always used to do. And you must have gotten some kind of results. You didn't get a PhD because you don't get things done. Obviously, you have been effective at getting things done. It's just you'd like to be more effective. But having done something pretty well already, you're going to have to let go of it. Those old habits, those things you've always done. I always check my email first thing in the morning. I always write down this type of task, but I have never been in the habit of writing down that type of task. I always put all my my work related stuff in here, but I don't put any of my personal stuff in there because I'm at work. I shouldn't be thinking about that or doing that, except that's not really how life works. And vice versa. You can't spend all of your time scheduling, picking up the kids from school and doctor's appointments and all that and ignore your work. You have to do all of it. So the first thing is to acknowledge that, okay, I have some old habits, and you've gotten this far in life into adulthood and you've seen the power of habit. Habits can be so compelling, and not all habits are good, obviously. But here's the tough one. When a habit has been good for you, those can be really hard to let go of. You used to do it a certain way. Now your new system is telling you to do it different. But the back of your head is telling you the old system was good. The old system worked. What will I lose if I let go of this? Well, it's kind of like if you want to swim across the pool, you're going to have to let go of the side of the pool. You have to get in there and start swimming. And yes, when you let go, you have a little more chance of sinking below the water. But it's just a choice you've already made. And remember, if you've chosen a new system, you went through this process, you have thought about it, you have considered the impact. So now you just need to get in there and start swimming. So that it starts with that. Put it another way, either you're going to do your old habits or you're going to change. If you don't make the commitment to change, you will go backwards. It's the opposite direction of what you've chosen here. And yes, sometimes having made a choice, it was hard and it was scary. And maybe you're even still scared about it. And you don't know what the future holds. I do know the results I get with my old system. I don't know for sure what kind of results I will get with the new system. Well, if you like data, get in there and start creating it. Start getting feedback so that you will know what will happen. Now, this is not so that you can set yourself up to shoot down the new system, but you do want to see things in practice, because at the beginning, you've got your fantasies about, oh, it's going to be so much better. Everything's going to be perfect. It's all going to be so smooth. Probably not. It's not going to be that straightforward. Get in there and start finding out where the rough spots are. Where do you need to dial things in a little more? What's missing that you didn't think of before, but now it's screaming at you? Don't look at those things as alarm bells going off. They're not emergencies. They're just information. And now it's good to know that, all right, I need to shore this up a little bit over here, or I need to change something additional so that this will work. The objective always is you want it to work out for you. You have to have a system of some kind, whether it's super dialed in or whether it is more flowy, whatever it is, it's got to be something that works for you. And give yourself a chance. Get in there and do it. Make some mistakes, get better at it. Because that's the other thing. Everything you've ever learned how to do, you started off doing it without experience. So, to ride that bike, you had to actually take a chance and get on the bike. And at some point, you had to pull off the training wheels and find out, can I do this or not? And everybody who's ever rode a bike, I've never met anybody that will claim they never fell down. We've all done it. You fall down sometimes, and sometimes it really hurts, but probably it doesn't kill you. Well, in fact, if you're here, it didn't kill you, right? And it'd be the same thing with this. Now, part of when we chose a system that would work for us, we chose something that would not lead to catastrophic failure. That's already kind of built into the system. The system is built that it can take some knocks. So have some confidence in it, and have some confidence in your selection. Trust yourself. At the end of the day, you've gotten this far trusting yourself. Even if you've doubted yourself, even if you've dabbled with imposter syndrome, which we've talked about several times in the past, the fact is that you've come through. And in many cases, come through with flying colors, and you didn't give yourself credit. So give yourself a little credit that, you know what, you can work this out. You can take it to the next level, and you can make a new system work. And it will go more quickly if you get in, if you get engaged and involved. Otherwise, if you're hesitant, you're not going to make any progress, and then you're just wasting your time, and you're slowing things down. So I will pause for a minute here and let Nick jump on in.
Makes sense to me so far. I'm just waiting for the bit about the avoiding the demand avoidance thing, because that's me. But no, this is I suppose one of the main things is, though, I love reading about these systems, figuring out what will work for me, and then setting them up, and off I go. Mm-hmm. And I use a version of Zen to Done, or I have set up a version of Zen to Done. Mm-hmm. But then the real test is living it. And right. As you said, it's like the honeymoon period, isn't it? Is you find out where it doesn't work for you, and where it gets sticky for you, and and then you have to find a way to get through that and kind of personalize that, make that work for yourself. So
right, and that happens in motion, because we all have those times when, like, look, I want to follow the system, but I have a really, really good reason why I'm not going to follow the system right now.
Today, yeah. The diet starts tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly. I remember back in the day, this is probably before most of your time, there was this actress. Her name was Toadie Fields, and she used to be on the daytime talk shows, and she was funny. She's a comedian, And she wrote a book called I Think I'll Start on Monday, because she was quite overweight, and she and she really traded on that. It was part of her shtick, and it was always about, I'm gonna go on a diet, I'm gonna go on a diet, I'm gonna go on a diet, and of course she never does. And the hilarious discussion about it just was ongoing, but it's always struck me that, like, wow, she can't go on a diet on Monday. Her whole life is built around the fact that she needs to go on a diet. And you may find yourself doing stuff like that. And you got to watch for that. You got to pay attention. When am I playing this game? There's a quote I wanted to reference here from somebody, F.M. Alexander. People do not decide their futures. They decide their habits, and their habits decide their futures.
Nice.
Yeah, and when you think about that, you realize, what has my habit been? Because the habit starts to take over. The thinking isn't happening anymore. Now, this particular person who wrote this is an author and also was an actor. And he developed a thing called the Alexander technique, or the Alexander method. And it's very interesting how that all worked. It's a physiological thing, the Alexander technique. It's basically how to have good posture, which mattered for a stage actor, and matters in a lot of things. Now, I'm not necessarily recommending the technique or recommending against it. That's not the point. But the point is that he recognized that there were habits they even were downright physiological, that impacted his output in his chosen field. And the same thing happens to all of us. Now, there's two kinds of habits that I wanted to talk about here that may show up for you. It's your habits surrounding starting tasks and your habits surrounding finishing tasks. So some of us have a hard time starting. And once we get going, we're okay, but starting is so hard. You really need to look at yourself and go, what is happening in that moment? My habit is to avoid starting. Why? What am I doing? How do I do it? What methods do I use to keep from starting? Do I use distraction? Do I start making value judgments about this is more important than that, and therefore, even though I chose to schedule this thing to do now, I'm not going to do it because there's this other thing that's more important? Well, it is more important that you do things to survive than that you have fun. and, as far as long-term viability, right? Except you do need to have fun sometimes. And if you never allow yourself to have fun because it's not about survival, you won't start things. So you need to pay attention to when I'm not starting things. Sometimes you want to dig into why, but other times it's just taking note that, hey, I'm hesitating to start. I'm not gonna put up with that. You don't need to talk yourself into it. You don't need to have a conversation in your own head. It's just like, I'm just gonna start. Just, it doesn't matter why I wasn't starting before. I'm just gonna start, and just start, and then watch what happens next. You will find that it's kind of a flywheel effect. Once you get going, you're okay. You've I think I mentioned the Pomodoro technique in our last session. The idea that if you'll just commit 20 minutes to something, say, look, I'm not committing to finish writing this paper. I'm just going to commit 20 minutes into it. I'm in the first 20 minutes, all I'm going to do is start working on an outline. That's all. In fact, I'm just going to start the outline. That's all I'm going to do for 20 minutes. After you're in it for 20 minutes, you ask yourself again, am I ready to commit another 20 minutes? And usually the answer is going to be, yeah, I'm in it. And I've got momentum, and you'll get going on it. And that becomes a habit. If you get in a habit of taking the first step, you'll find taking first steps is easier and easier and easier. Now, the other side of that, do you have a habit of not finishing tasks? You get excited, you get involved, and it's like, this is getting detailed and boring. And now there's these other shiny things I want to start. And then you start the next thing and start the next thing. And all of a sudden you've got all of these unfinished things sitting around. Well, how do you motivate yourself there? Well, by starting finishing. That is, treat it like it's a new project. The new project is to come from where I am now to where I want to go next. And that's always true. That never stops being accurate. So the point of all this is to take a look at your own emotional barrier here. I have a hard time starting. I have a hard time finishing. Maybe both. Who knows? But to just acknowledge it. Okay, this is how it is, and this is just an emotional thing. It's not. It's not a systemic problem. It's. I mean, if you lack things, I need more information before I can start, or I need approval, or what. Well, fine. If there are practical things, then make that the project. The project now is to get approval for the project. The project now is to get the data I need for the project. Fine. Just start looking at it that way and taking that next step. And then you want to start rewarding yourself emotionally. Praise yourself for look at me go. I started. Or look at me, I finished it. I'm isn't that great? I'm worthy of something. It is more than okay to reward yourself in some way for having successfully started or finished. It doesn't have to be a big thing. I'm going to reward myself by going and getting a latte. You could reward yourself like, when I finish this, I'm taking the family on vacation. Sometimes the reward needs to be big, and the motivation of that potential reward is there for you, and it will help you to establish these habits. And I'm sure people that are really good at getting things done. And you watch them, like, how do they do that? They did it the same way that I'm suggesting to you now. They got in there and started doing, and then it got to be such a pattern for them, such a habit, that they just never stopped. And of course, they got the rewards of the success of taking action. And now they have that as a kind of a substructure underneath it all. Like, I know I'm going to get some satisfaction when I start this. I know I'm going to get a big payoff when I finish this. Start using those things and stop ignoring that you're acting emotionally. You're a human. You're going to have emotional reactions. Sometimes they're avoidant, but other times they're moving you toward things. Use that stuff. There's nothing wrong with drafting on another person. Somebody else is succeeding, start following them. If somebody else is getting a lot done, start getting a lot done to match them. You can use competition that way in a positive sense, and it'll help you move forward. Okay. So now let's talk about this from the negative side. Sometimes we look at it, look, I got this great system and I've implemented it and I'm using it properly, but other people keep getting in my way. I'm getting interrupted all the time. And sometimes it's like, well, I'm being interrupted by peers, and okay, that's a problem. But I'm getting interrupted by my boss. I can't ignore that. I can't just say, well, I'd get more done if my boss wasn't in my way all the time. Your boss has reasons to be in your way. Actually, so do your peers. But um, we can't pretend that's not going to happen. So if you plan your day in such a way that you have no room for interruptions, well, you're not planning properly. Now, it may be that you just need to plan 6 hours worth of work in an 8-hour day, and maybe that solves your problem. But maybe that's not how it is. Maybe it's when I get interrupted, I'm just totally taken off track, and I have to go down another road. You do still need to acknowledge that is the lay of the land. If it's such that you just can't take it anymore, then maybe you do need to change the lab you're working in, change the way you're doing work. But for most of us, that's not really the answer. It's not a matter of, well, I just don't feel like it. It's just too hard. You're doing work that's hard. You've been doing work that's hard, and you've been doing work that's hard for many years to get to the level you're at. Hard work isn't the problem. In fact, you've gotten a lot of satisfaction from doing things that are hard. So, don't run away from that, but acknowledge that this is how it is. Now, some folks are in a chaotic environment just by nature. If you're an emergency room doctor, literally everything you encounter is an emergency. Yeah, that's a tough environment, and it's not for everybody. But for the right people, it is absolutely the right environment. So if you're finding that having an environment that has a fair amount of chaos is actually good for you and actually motivates you and actually energizes you, great. Accept that motivation and energy, but also accept the impacts of it and see it. And then start asking yourself, how can I mitigate this? What can I do to make this easier? Maybe not even easier this time, but next time in the future. What can I put in place that will help with this? And it may be that you set up a team so that you can offload some of these emergencies onto others. Maybe it's a matter of preempting things, seeing in advance. This kind of problem keeps popping up, and I can make it pop up less if I take these steps. And then maybe you need to work it into your system that I've always got this fudge factor available. That when I need it, I can pull it in and it won't create chaos. So, everything that you're promising about delivering on has got room so that if something else pops up in between, that it won't crash and burn your project. All right. Enough about outside influences. Now let's talk about inside influences. One of the things that stops us more often than anything else is fear. And we often don't want to acknowledge that. We think, well, fear is kind of a childish thing and it's irrational. And that's not who I am. I'm an adult and I'm a scientist and I'm a logician and I'm a capable person. To claim, though, that you never are made afraid by anything is disingenuous. It's not realistic. So when you have fear, you want to acknowledge it. And when I say acknowledge it, I don't mean engage with it. We're not having a conversation with the fear. We're merely just looking at it and going, oh, look at that. I'm afraid about something. I'm afraid I won't get this done. I'm afraid this project's going to fail. I'm afraid that somebody is going to get in my way. Whatever the fear is, acknowledge it. Because the fact is, if you have fears about things, that are getting in the way of you accomplishing tasks, those fears are not going to just vanish. And you can't just treat them as if you're talking to a child like, look, there's no monster in the closet. That's silly. Stop thinking that. If you've ever tried doing that with a child, it doesn't work. You can't just poo-poo it and push it away and pretend it's not there. What you have to say, look at that. There is fear there. And with no judgment, it's like, and it's not stupid to be afraid, and it's not lazy to be afraid, and it's not it's not timidity that's making you afraid. It's just something is causing that to pop up. So acknowledge that it's there, because if you don't, it's going to keep trying to get your attention. And it will, and often you've probably noticed this. You don't pay attention to something, it amplifies. And we've had this kind of experience just with, they say something physical. It's like, my knee's a little sore. And I ignore it and I ignore it. Now my knee is really sore. And now my knee is injured. There was an escalation there. And at each step of the way, you didn't acknowledge the problem. If you will just, the earlier you can acknowledge that fear is welling up, the better off you're going to be. The more likely you're going to deal with it. And when I say deal with it, I don't mean stopping and making some intellectual choices about what's to happen. When you acknowledge fear, it gets internalized. The not the fear itself, but the acknowledgement gets internalized, and you will start to deal with it. It'll start happening. Okay, you'll get in front of this, because if that first time you look at your system, it's like, oh no, I have to prepare for the Monday morning meeting, and I don't want to work on the weekend. Well, great. Now that you know that, you're right. I need to schedule something for me to do on Friday, so I'm prepared for Monday's meeting. All that because you acknowledge the fear. If you just push the fear away, it won't be there until Monday morning rolls around. Like, oh my God, I'm not prepared, and now here I am on the speaker stand. Now what? Then fear is really debilitating. So just deal with it when it's small and when it's early, and you'll find you're going to have a lot better time. Another thing that happens is, have you ever noticed that sometimes you start doing things, and maybe even in the past they used to be useful, but for now they're not the best use of your time, but you just can't stop. I have to finish this thing. I used to do this all on notebook paper, and even though I've got a system, nice online system, I'm going to keep doodling on this notepad until I finish. And then you're not going to use it. You're going to use your automated system, or now you have to transfer what's on the notepad into the automated system. Why do you do that? Well, it's because it's familiar and it's comfortable. And we are definitely drawn to things that make us comfortable. And there's nothing bad about that. But well, nothing generally bad about that. But in the specific instance, there are times when you got to tell yourself, I don't want to pursue this dopamine hit of creating this manual list. What I want to do is start getting my dopamine hits from following the new system. And again, this is the installation of new habits, and you've got to break the old habits too. So it's not just a new habit has to start. Old habits have to end. And that's, we've talked about addiction to dopamine in the past too. And it's a real thing. We all do it, and we're all being compelled to do it. I mean, our phones are doing it to us. All these systems and social media have been designed to attack us that way, and to wrangle away our own dopamine response. And in the past, we had an episode on going on a dopamine fast. It's a good idea. Every once in a while, you just need to stop all of that. Turn off all the devices if that's what's causing it for you. Turn off the television if that's what's causing it for you. Stop listening to podcasts. And I'm not saying forever, but give yourself a breather. Give yourself a break. And when you find yourself going back to an old habit, just stop. Don't have a conversation with yourself about it. Don't engage it. Just like we don't engage fear, don't engage your compulsions. And we all have compulsions. Don't beat yourself up about it like, oh man, this means that I'm an addict, or this means that I'm psychologically imbalanced. No, you're just human. We all have these compulsions, and they're satisfying in short term. And we will miss that satisfaction. We will wish we had it. It's okay. You can forego a satisfaction, and it's going to be okay. Forego that satisfaction, move on to the next thing, and you will find something else will replace it. And you'll find you get more resilient, that you can go longer between needing periods of satisfaction. Because if you have to be satisfied at every given moment, you're going to act in a very childish manner. And I say that in the most professional sense, right? It's not that you're going to act like a 2-year-old, but you're not going to act like the professional that you truly are. And it comes down to facing what's really in front of you. One other thing. Do you find sometimes you don't follow the system because I'm just not gonna? You can't make me follow the system. I don't care if I put it in place. I don't have to. I'm fully in charge of my existence, and I can do whatever I want whenever I want. It's freedom, right? I mean, freedom is great. And freedom is important. In fact, freedom is a source of your free thinking, which is just a critical skill to have as a scientist. But you need to recognize when you're acting in rebellion, when you're jumping out there and you're just being a rebel without a cause, like James Dean here on the screen. If you're going to rebel, do it with purpose. If you're finding it's just a short-term satisfaction thing, that's not a very compelling reason to engage with it. So I'm not telling you to stop rebelling. In fact, rebellion is really necessary in science, but make sure you do it on purpose and with purpose, that you're gonna get something of value out of it, not just short-term satisfaction. So once again, Nick, I'll let you jump in.
No, I'm writing down here. So this is definitely an Achilles heel for me, this one, because you get I'm just looking at the things you wrote down: outside influences, fear, compulsion, and rebellion are all ways that you stop yourself following that system, or stop yourself from getting past the honeymoon period and into become proficient at running that system. So for me, they all play a part depending on what the on what it is, really. But that thing about the dopamine hit is quite compelling, because you go for that. You go for dopamine. That's what you're programmed to do. So if you can make the dopamine hit about having your inbox at 0, or ticking the thing off the list or whatever, that is, I guess, is that the way? Is that the goal sort of thing, or a way to get this, to take advantage of your programming here to make it to work?
And it can't be just a something as gross as inbox to 0, because one day that is a very good goal, and the next day it's not a very good goal. So we have to be a little more nuanced about it. We have to choose where we're getting our dopamine hits from, and we usually aren't. And that really is the big shift. So start being the chooser instead of just being the recipient of the choice. And that can make a big difference for you. And you mentioned, we talked about fear, we talked about compulsion, we talked about rebellion. A lot of folks will hear those three things and go, I don't like the sound of any of those, and I don't like to even be associated with that. But you can look at the flip side. You're like, what if I'm courageous? And what if I'm free thinking? And what if I am in charge of my own existence. You can look at this from that positive standpoint and use that to motivate you. Some people, it will be very motivating. The negative is motivating to them. They want to push away from that. Other people want to push toward the positive. Or it's some mix of that. And maybe it's dependent on what's happening for you in the moment. Right now, I'm avoiding a negative, but tomorrow I'm happy to pursue a positive, and use them both.
I just had a thought of two parallel things, maybe tools that work or that help with that. One was, and I'm sure it's from Jason Fried. What's that book he wrote? You wrote two, didn't you? One of them.
He's the CEO of 37 Signals.
Yes.
He's actually written a couple books.
The second one, whatever his second one was. But he talked about having that your goal should be able to get to the stage where you can have guilt-free fun.
Yeah.
And that should be your aim, is that you feel that everything's under control enough that now you can you don't have to carry it with you for the rest of once work is finished. Now it's time to go and have some fun, and you don't have to feel bad about it.
Yeah.
And rather than rebellion, you go, nah, I'm going to take some time off and without doing all this stuff.
Yeah,
but you
I'm
kind of
going to
feel
break the system and screw it. You can't make me, kind of thing.
Yeah, you kind of feel a bit guilty though about it, so you don't really get the benefit.
Right.
So
and for some folks, you need to schedule in your pleasure. You need to schedule the coffee break. You need to schedule the vacation. You need to schedule the time to read for pleasure. That needs to be in your to-do system. You know yourself. If you need that, get it in your system. Now, for some of us, we don't need that. We'll do those things fine. But if you're somebody who's been nose to the grindstone, shoulder to the wheel for years now, and often academia did that to you, you gotta allow yourself to schedule pleasure, and it's productive for you to do so.
Yeah. And the other thing I was thinking of as well is using a bit of brute force to get yourself out of your normal thought pattern when it comes to approaching what you need to do. When you sit down, and one of the really good one is there's one, it's like an inspirational video where you just watch. It's meant to be that you watch it at the start of each day, and it just kind of gets you a bit pumped. I used to have one of these, and it had like the Rocky theme tune on it and stuff like that. It's quite good. You just kind of get ready. But this one it's a Tony Robbins one. And if you can find it on YouTube, it's called Now I Am the Voice. And the idea is that you sit down and your brain just starts going, oh, I hate doing this. Oh, we've got so much to do. Da, da, da. And it's and it just goes on autopilot. and it's the same every time. And this thing is about just giving yourself, I think it's 7 minutes long or so, 5 or 7 minutes long. And the idea is just to give yourself 5 minutes to get into the zone of, actually, don't listen to that bumbling voice. That's not your voice. Now you to say what you want to happen. And as you get into the habit of doing that, the idea is to do it every day. That as you get into the habit of doing it, that gets stronger. Your ability to say, no, this is what's going to happen. Consciously say it, rather than let the script tell you or the videotape that's running in the background all the time. Rather than that telling you what's going to happen, then that's the idea of that video. So that helps you use a bit of brute force to kind of shove this in the right direction.
Sure. And some folks may be listening to that going, oh God, Tony Robbins, are you kidding me? Like, well, what do you need? You need to be Carl Jung? If it works, it works.
If you read the life story of Tony Robbins, then he has whatever else you think of him, he has been able to motivate himself. So I would definitely
millions of others.
Yeah, I would definitely listen to him on motivation. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, and it doesn't matter who that is. There are people that they get into the limelight, and sometimes they fall out of it. Sometimes it's just because they're in the limelight, they're getting shot at all the time, and all you hear is all the negative stuff about them. Look at what works. Look at what's getting results, and go from there. Yeah. And you don't have to apologize for it. You don't have to broadcast it either. But if you if you want to start your day with "I am the voice" every day, it will not hurt you.
or the Rocky theme tune, one of them.
Yeah, or whatever, the Rocky and Bullwinkle theme tune, whatever you want to do, and it's funny how some of those little things, it's not that they're motivating for everybody, but they are for us. We have some connection to something. If you find something like that works, don't be ashamed. And again, you don't have to make it a public thing. There's plenty we can do in private that moves us. There are people that meditate every day. There are people that pray every day, and we look at it, oh, come on, really? You know what? It's working for them, and they're getting results, and they're getting measurable results. So we can't argue with the data.
Definitely. Well, and as a scientist, you shouldn't just assume what the data is going to be for you. You should go and try it out and get your own data set.
Well, I like that. So there's something that I wouldn't have thought to say that the scientist in the room did. So good for you.
There you go.
All right. Well, that's what I had to say today. Anything else you want to add, Nick?
Okay. No, I think that's really good. I mean, I do love when we hit upon this a few episodes ago and decided to come back to it, that it's one thing setting up your system, and there are a lot of systems out there for getting organized and staying motivated, and but organizing your tasks mainly. But then there's all these things that stop you from executing the system. That was kind of like okay, I see. I don't need another system. I need to figure out why I don't do this system well.
Yeah, exactly.
The system I've got is pretty good, but I still have quite a lot of chaos, and it's because of this stuff. And I didn't realize until you'd popped that up in that a few episodes ago. So
yeah,
cool.
All right, excellent.
All right, so thank you everybody for taking the time to join us, and if you've enjoyed it, please subscribe to The Happy Scientist on your favorite podcast platform. Leave a review, that'll help other people to find it, and of course, tell your friends so that they can also benefit. So we will be back with another episode in a few weeks. Until then, good luck in your research, and goodbye from all of us at Bitesize Bio.
Bye.
The Happy Scientist is brought to you by Bitesize Bio, your mentor in the lab. Bitesize Bio features thousands of articles and webinars contributed by hundreds of PhD scientists and scientific companies who freely offer their hard-won wisdom and solutions to the Bitesize Bio community.